The silence before the storm. The beacon appeared on Earth's long-range sensors on a Tuesday morning, drifting through the outer edge of the solar system like a ghost from another age. It was ancient, its surface scarred by countless meteor impacts and radiation burns that spoke of centuries spent in the void. Captain Elena Torres stood in the observation deck of the research vessel Pathfinder, watching the strange object grow larger on the view screen as her ship approached. Elena was 42 years old, with dark hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and eyes that had seen many failed missions to get excited easily. She had spent 15 years with the Solar Exploration Initiative, most of that time cataloging dead satellites and space debris. This was different. The beacon was transmitting, its signal weak but unmistakable, pulsing in patterns that no human had ever created. "Captain, we're picking up the transmission clearly now," said Lieutenant James Park from the communication station. He was young, barely 30, with the enthusiasm of someone who had not yet learned that space was mostly empty and boring. "It's definitely not human origin. The signal structure is complex, layered with what looks like data packets. Can you decode it?" Elena asked, moving closer to examine the readouts. "Working on it. The AI is processing the patterns now." James typed rapidly, his fingers dancing across the holographic interface. "Captain, this is incredible. The signal contains star maps, biological data, and what looks like a plea for help." Elena felt her stomach tighten. In all her years exploring space, humanity had never encountered another intelligent species. Earth had been alone, sending out messages into the void and receiving only silence in return. Now that silence was broken, and the first message humanity received was a cry for help. "Put it on screen," she ordered. The view screen shifted, displaying a holographic figure that materialized in the center of the observation deck. It was humanoid but distinctly alien, with elongated limbs and skin that shimmered like pearl under moonlight. Its eyes were large and multifaceted, reflecting light in ways that seemed to shift through colors Elena had no names for. When it spoke, the words were translated by the AI into understandable speech. "To any who receive this message, we are the Zelthari of the Seventh Spiral. Our civilization has endured for 12,000 cycles, dedicated to knowledge, art, and the peaceful exploration of the cosmos. But now we face extinction. The Voidborn have come to our worlds, consuming everything in their path. We have no weapons, no military, no way to defend ourselves. Our philosophy has always been one of harmony and non-violence. That philosophy is now our doom. If there are species out there who can help, who possess the strength to stand against this darkness, we beg you to come. The coordinates to our homeworld are embedded in this beacon. Please, before it is too late." The hologram flickered and vanished. Elena stood in silence, processing what she had just witnessed. Around her, the crew exchanged uncertain glances. "Run a diagnostic on that message," Elena said quietly. "I want to know how old it is and verify those coordinates." "Already on it, Captain," James replied. "Based on the decay rate of the transmission and the beacon's trajectory, this message was sent approximately 3 years ago. The coordinates point to a star system roughly 40 light-years from Earth. 3 years." Elena felt the weight of that number. Whatever had happened to the Zelthari, whatever these Voidborn were, the situation had been deteriorating for 3 years while the message drifted through space searching for anyone who could help. "Send everything to Earth Command," Elena ordered. "Full data packet including the translation and our analysis. We need guidance on this." The response from Earth came faster than Elena expected. Within 6 hours, she received a direct transmission from Admiral Sarah Okonkwo, the head of the Solar Exploration Initiative. The Admiral's face appeared on the view screen, her expression grave. "Captain Torres, the Global Defense Council has reviewed your findings. This is a historic moment, but also a dangerous one. We have no idea what these Voidborn are or what we would be walking into. The Council is divided. Some want to send a full expedition. Others believe we should stay out of conflicts that don't concern us. With respect, Admiral, we're talking about an entire civilization facing extinction," Elena said. "If we don't at least investigate, what does that say about humanity?" Admiral Okonkwo was quiet for a moment. "That's exactly what I told the Council. You're authorized to proceed to Zelthari space with the Pathfinder. This is a reconnaissance mission only. Assess the situation, make contact if possible, but do not engage in any military action without direct authorization." "Understood?" "Understood, Admiral. And Captain? Be careful. We have no idea what you're flying into." The journey to Zelthari space took 3 weeks at faster-than-light speeds. the Pathfinder's experimental drive pushing the boundaries of human engineering. Elena spent those weeks studying everything they knew about the message, which was frustratingly little. The Zelthari had provided biological data showing they were carbon-based life forms with similar biochemistry to humans, but their culture and capabilities remained a mystery. Her crew was small, only 20 people, all volunteers who had signed up knowing they might not return. There was James Park on communications, Dr. Yuki Tanaka handling medical and xenobiology, Lieutenant Commander Robert Hayes managing tactical systems, and Engineer Sofia Martinez keeping the ship running, despite its tendency to develop problems at inconvenient moments. They dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Zelthari home system, and immediately everything changed. The view screen showed a sight that made Elena's blood run cold. Dozens of ships drifted in space, massive vessels that dwarfed the Pathfinder. But they were not moving. They were dark, dead, their hulls breached and torn open like someone had ripped them apart from the inside. Reading residual energy signatures from multiple battles, Robert reported from Tactical. These ships have been here for months, maybe longer. Whatever happened here, it was violent. Captain, I'm picking up a weak distress signal from one of the larger vessels, James said. It's automated, but there might be survivors. Elena made her decision quickly. Change course. Let's check it out. The Pathfinder approached the damaged vessel carefully, scanning for any signs of danger. The ship was enormous, easily 3 times the size of any human spacecraft, with elegant curves and designs that spoke of a culture that valued beauty even in their starships. But now it was a graveyard. I'm reading life signs, Yuki said, surprise in her voice. Faint, but definitely there. Approximately 20 individuals still alive in a sealed section near the ship's core. Prepare a boarding team, Elena ordered. Robert, Sophia, Yuki, you're with me. James, keep the ship ready for immediate departure if things go wrong. They suited up in EVA gear and crossed the void between ships, entering through a breach in the hull. Inside, the vessel was dark except for emergency lighting that cast everything in a sickly green glow. The corridors were wide and tall, designed for beings larger than humans. Strange symbols covered the walls. Beautiful flowing script that might have been writing or art or both. They found the survivors in what looked like a medical bay, huddled together behind an emergency force field. When Elena's team entered, the Zelthari reacted with fear at first, backing away from the armored humans. But then one of them stepped forward, taller than the rest, its pearl-like skin dulled by exhaustion and stress. You came, it said, the words translated by Elena's suit computer. Someone actually came. We're human from Earth, Elena said, removing her helmet so they could see her face. We received your beacon. What happened here? The Zelthari's large eyes seemed to shimmer with what might have been tears. The Voidborn came 3 years ago. At first we thought they were just another species, perhaps lost or damaged. We offered them aid, shelter, everything we had. But they weren't looking for help. They were looking for food. Food? Elena felt her stomach turn. They consume biological matter, break it down, and incorporate it into their collective. They started with our outer colonies, overwhelming our ships not with weapons but with sheer numbers. We tried to evacuate to save as many as we could, but everywhere we ran, they followed. This fleet was supposed to be a safe haven, but they found us even here. Sophia stepped forward, her engineer's mind already working on the problem. How did you survive when everyone else didn't? We sealed ourselves in this section when the Voidborn breached the hull. They tried to get through, but the force field held. We've been here for 42 days, waiting for either rescue or death. Our supplies are nearly exhausted. Elena looked at her team, seeing her own determination reflected in their faces. We're getting you out of here. How many can you move? All of us, but we're weak. Many are injured. Then we'll carry them if we have to. Elena activated her comlink. James, prepare the medical bay for incoming casualties. We're bringing survivors aboard. The evacuation took hours. The Zelthari were taller than humans, but surprisingly light, their bones hollow like birds. Elena and her team made multiple trips, carrying the weakest first while the stronger Zelthari managed to walk with assistance. Throughout the operation, Elena kept expecting an attack, kept waiting for these Voidborn to appear, but the dead ships remained silent. Once everyone was safely aboard the Pathfinder, Elena ordered them to move deeper into the system toward the Zelthari homeworld. What they found there shook her to her core. The planet itself was intact. its blue-green surface still visible from orbit, but surrounding it was a massive debris field. Thousands of ships, destroyed stations, and what looked like entire habitats torn apart and scattered across space. "Captain, I'm detecting active void-borne signatures," Robert said, his voice tight. "Multiple contacts incoming fast." On the view screen, Elena saw them. They weren't ships in the traditional sense. They were masses of dark organic matter, pulsing and writhing as they moved through space. They had no clear shape, constantly shifting and reforming. But within that darkness, Elena could see things that looked like eyes, mouths, appendages reaching out hungrily. "Evasive maneuvers," Elena ordered. "Get us out of here." The Pathfinder turned and accelerated, but the Voidborn were fast. One of the masses lunged forward, extending tendrils that lashed at the ship's hull. Alarms blared as the outer plating began to corrode where the Voidborn touched it. "They're trying to breach the hull," Sophia shouted. "Whatever that stuff is, it's eating through our armor." Robert fired the Pathfinder's defensive weapons, plasma bolts that slammed into the Voidborn mass. For a moment, Elena thought it would work. The creature recoiled, parts of its form burning away, but then it reformed, the damaged sections regenerating almost instantly. "Captain, we can't fight these things conventionally," Robert said. "Our weapons aren't designed for this." Elena's mind raced. They were outmatched, outgunned, and facing an enemy that could regenerate faster than they could damage it. But then she noticed something. The Zelthari survivors were watching the battle from the medical bay, and one of them was gesturing frantically at a console. "The Voidborn are sensitive to certain frequencies," the tall Zelthari said through the translator. "We discovered this before our communications network fell. High-intensity electromagnetic pulses disrupt their cellular cohesion temporarily." "Sophia, can we generate that kind of pulse?" Elena asked. The engineer's fingers flew across her console. "Maybe. If I reroute power from the FTL drive and overload the sensor array, we could create a focused EMP burst. But it'll fry half our systems and leave us dead in space for at least an hour." "Do it," Elena ordered without hesitation. Sophia worked frantically while Robert kept firing, buying them precious seconds. The Voidborn mass was almost on top of them now, its tendrils wrapping around the Pathfinder's hull like a grotesque embrace. Then Sophia activated the pulse. A wave of electromagnetic energy exploded outward from the ship, invisible but devastating. The Voidborn mass convulsed, its form breaking apart into thousands of smaller pieces that drifted away like ash on a wind. The other Voidborn in the area retreated, apparently unwilling to risk the same fate. "It worked," James said, almost unable to believe it. "They're pulling back, but their victory came at a cost. Half the ship's systems were offline, emergency power barely keeping life support running. They were stranded in hostile territory with limited resources, and an enemy that now knew humans could hurt them." Elena looked at the Zelthari survivors, then at her crew. They had come here on a reconnaissance mission, but everything had changed. Humanity had just fired its first shots in a war they barely understood, protecting a species they had only just met. "Get me a secure channel to Earth Command," Elena said quietly. "They need to know what we're facing. And tell them we need reinforcements. A lot of them." The tall Zelthari approached Elena, its large eyes reflecting gratitude and something else, perhaps hope. "You fought for us, why?" "You barely know us." Elena thought about that question, about all the reasons she could give, but in the end, the answer was simple. "Because someone needed help and we were able to give it. That's reason enough." As the Pathfinder drifted in the darkness, its system slowly coming back online, Elena stared at the Zelthari homeworld on the view screen. Somewhere down there, millions of beings were fighting for survival against an enemy that consumed everything. Humanity had just taken its first step into a larger galaxy, and that step had led them directly into the fire. But Elena knew her species. Humans had survived ice ages, plagues, wars, and disasters that should have ended them. They had climbed out of caves and reached for the stars. If the Zelthari needed guardians, if they needed someone who wouldn't back down even when the odds were impossible, then humanity would answer that call. The real fight was just beginning. The stand at Zelthar Prime. The Pathfinder limped into orbit around Zelthar Prime, 72 hours after the first encounter with the Voidborn. Elena stood on the bridge watching as the planet slowly rotated beneath them. From space it looked almost peaceful. Vast oceans reflected the light of the system's star, and continents covered in what appeared to be forests or cultivated lands stretched between them. Cities gleamed like clusters of jewels, their architecture flowing and organic, as if the buildings had been grown rather than constructed. But the illusion of peace shattered when Elena looked closer. Massive dark patches scarred the northern continent, areas where the Voidborn had already landed and consumed everything. The patches were growing, spreading like infection across the planet's skin. Orbital defense platforms hung silent and dark, their weapon systems destroyed or abandoned. Debris from destroyed ships created rings around the planet, a memorial to failed defenses. "Captain, I'm receiving multiple transmissions from the surface," James reported. "Refugee centers, emergency shelters, military command posts. They're all asking for help, for evacuation, for anything we can provide." Elena felt the weight of those desperate voices pressing down on her. The Pathfinder was a research vessel with a crew of 20. What could they possibly do against a threat that had already devastated an entire civilization? "Open a channel to the strongest signal," she ordered. "Let's talk to whoever is coordinating the defense." The view screen flickered to life, showing the interior of what looked like a command center carved directly into stone. Zelthari moved frantically in the background, working at consoles and coordinating communications. In the center stood a being that commanded immediate respect, despite the exhaustion visible in every line of its body. "I am Elder Seraphix," the Zelthari said, its voice resonating with authority even through the translator. "You are the humans who rescued our people from the Ghost Fleet. Word of your actions has reached us. We are grateful, but I must ask why you have come here. There is no hope left on Zelthar Prime. The Voidborn grow stronger every day and we grow weaker. You should leave while you still can." "We came because you asked for help," Elena replied firmly, "and we don't abandon people just because the situation looks bad." Seraphix's multifaceted eyes studied Elena for a long moment. "You do not understand what you are offering. The Zelthari have never known war. For 12,000 cycles we have lived in peace, pursuing knowledge and beauty. We have no soldiers, no weapons beyond basic defense tools. Our entire philosophy is built on the principle that violence diminishes all beings. But the Voidborn do not care about philosophy. They only consume." "Then maybe it's time to change your philosophy," Elena said bluntly, "at least long enough to survive. Many of my people would rather die than compromise our principles. And how many have already died holding on to those principles while the Voidborn consumed them?" Elena's voice was sharp, cutting. "I'm not saying you need to become warriors forever. I'm saying you need to survive long enough to have the luxury of choosing your philosophy." Seraphix was silent, and Elena wondered if she had pushed too far. But then the elder made a gesture that the translator interpreted as agreement. "Perhaps you are right. Perhaps survival must come before principle just this once. What do you propose?" "First, I need to understand what we're dealing with. I have a xenobiologist on my crew who needs to study the Voidborn, understand their biology and weaknesses. Second, we need to contact Earth and request reinforcements. And third, we need to start organizing your people for defense, even if that goes against everything you believe. I will grant you access to our research facilities and any data we have collected on the Voidborn," Seraphix said, "but I must warn you, we have learned very little. They adapt quickly, evolving new forms to counter whatever resistance they encounter. It is as if they are not one species but thousands all working together." "That's exactly the kind of information we need," Elena replied. "Send the coordinates. We're coming down." The Pathfinder shuttle descended through Zelthar Prime's atmosphere, passing over landscapes that took Elena's breath away. The Zelthari had shaped their world into a work of art, with cities that blended seamlessly into the natural environment. Rivers flowed through urban centers and forests grew between buildings designed to complement rather than conquer nature. It was beautiful and it was dying. The dark patches Elena had seen from orbit were worse up close. The Voidborn infection looked like spreading rot, consuming forests and cities alike. Nothing remained where they had passed, only bare rock stripped of all organic matter. It was methodical, complete, terrifying in its efficiency. They landed at a facility built into the side of a mountain, far from the advancing Voidborn front. Elder Seraphix met them personally, accompanied by several other Zelthari who watched the humans with mixture of curiosity and desperation. Dr. Yuki Tanaka was the first off the shuttle, her medical scanner already active and recording data. She was a small woman in her mid-30s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She had volunteered for the mission specifically because of the xenobiological opportunities. But Elena could see the horror in her expression as she took in the devastation. "Take me to your research labs," Yuki said immediately. "I need to see everything you have on the Voidborn's biology." Seraphics led them deep into the mountain facility. The corridors were filled with refugees. Zelthari families huddled together with whatever possessions they had managed to save. Children stared at the humans with wide eyes, and Elena felt the weight of their hope pressing down on her shoulders. The research lab was impressive, filled with technology that made Earth's equipment look primitive. Holographic displays showed detailed scans of Voidborn specimens, their cellular structure constantly shifting and reorganizing. Yuki dove into the data immediately, her fingers flying across the alien interfaces as the Zelthari researchers showed her how to access their systems. "This is incredible," Yuki breathed, staring at the cellular scans. "The Voidborn aren't a single organism. They're a collective of billions of individual cells that can reorganize themselves into any form needed. Each cell is essentially a tiny machine, capable of breaking down organic matter and incorporating it into the collective." "Can they be killed?" Elena asked the critical question. "Individually, yes. The electromagnetic pulse you used disrupted their cellular cohesion. But as a collective, they're incredibly resilient. Destroy one form and they just reform elsewhere. It's like trying to kill a swarm of insects by swatting them one at a time." "There has to be a weakness," Elena insisted. "Everything has a weakness." Yuki worked in silence for several minutes, cross-referencing the Zelthari data with her own scans from the encounter. Then she froze, her eyes widening. "Wait, look at this. The Zelthari cellular structure is almost identical to the Voidborn's preferred food source. It's like the Voidborn evolved specifically to consume beings like the Zelthari. But human cellular structure is different. We have different proteins, different amino acid chains, even different gut bacteria." She pulled up comparative scans, showing human and Zelthari biology side by side. The Zelthari evolved on a gentle world with minimal pathogens and predators. Their immune systems are sophisticated but not aggressive. Humans evolved on Earth, which was constantly trying to kill us. We developed immune responses that are incredibly aggressive, gut bacteria that can break down almost anything, and we produce compounds that would be toxic to most life forms. "What are you saying?" Elena asked, though she was beginning to understand. "I'm saying that humans might be naturally resistant to Voidborn infection. Our biology is so different, so aggressive, that the Voidborn cells might not be able to process us efficiently. We could potentially create biological weapons based on human gut bacteria that would be toxic to the Voidborn." Seraphics, who had been listening quietly, stepped forward. "This is why you came. Not just your technology or your willingness to fight, but your very biology. You evolved on a world so harsh that you became weapons yourselves." Elena thought about Earth, about the diseases and predators and environmental challenges that had shaped humanity. Plagues that killed millions, ice ages that nearly ended the species, predators that hunted humans for millennia. Every challenge had made humanity stronger, more adaptable, more resilient. How long would it take to develop these biological weapons? Elena asked. "Weeks, maybe months to create something safe and effective," Yuki admitted. "But I could have a crude version ready in days if we're willing to accept some risks." "Do it," Elena ordered. "And in the meantime, we need to buy time." She turned to Seraphics. "I need to speak to Earth Command. We need reinforcements, supplies, and volunteers. But more than that, we need to start training your people, not to be soldiers, but to defend themselves long enough for evacuation." Over the next week, everything changed. Elena's message reached Earth, and the response was overwhelming. The Global Defense Council authorized a full expedition, not just military, but civilian volunteers, doctors, engineers, teachers. Hundreds of humans signed up to travel to Zelthar Prime, to stand between the Zelthari and extinction. The first wave arrived 6 days later, 3 transport ships carrying 500 volunteers and enough supplies to sustain operations for months. Among them was Dr. Marcus Chen, a xenobiologist from Beijing who had spent his career studying extremophile organisms. He was tall and lean with graying hair and an intensity that reminded Elena of Yuki. "Dr. Tanaka's preliminary findings are fascinating," Marcus said within hours of arriving. "I've been working on refinements to her biological weapon concept. Human gut bacteria produce compounds like butyric acid and propionic acid that are antimicrobial. In concentrated form, these could potentially disrupt Voidborn cellular cohesion even more effectively than electromagnetic pulses. How do we deploy it?" Elena asked. Aerosol dispersion would be most effective. We create concentrated bacterial cultures, load them into dispersal devices, and release them in areas where the Voidborn are advancing. It won't kill them permanently, but it should slow their advance significantly. While the scientists worked on biological countermeasures, Elena focused on organization. The human volunteers were a mixed group: former military personnel, construction workers, teachers, doctors, anyone who wanted to help. They set up defensive perimeters around the remaining Zelthari population centers, taught basic defensive tactics, and helped evacuate civilians from threatened areas. The Zelthari watched these preparations with conflicted emotions. Many were grateful but uncomfortable with the violence humans brought with them. Others, like Seraphix, recognized the necessity and began working with the humans to coordinate defenses. "Your species is very different from ours," Seraphix said one evening, as Elena reviewed defense plans. "You embrace conflict in a way we never have. Is that strength or is it damage?" Elena considered the question carefully. Maybe it's both. Earth hasn't been kind to humanity. We fought for survival since the beginning, against nature, against each other, against everything. That fighting has left scars, but it's also made us resilient. We know how to take a hit and keep moving forward. I wonder what we could have become if we had evolved on a world like yours, Seraphix mused. Would we be stronger? Or would we have lost the things that make us who we are? I don't think you need to become like us, Elena said. You just need to survive long enough to remain yourselves. That's what we're fighting for, the right for your people to choose your own path. The Voidborn attacked 3 days later. The defense satellites detected them first, massive swarms launching from the infected zones and moving toward the largest remaining population center. There were millions of them, darkening the sky like a living storm. All defensive positions, prepare for contact. Elena broadcast across all channels. Remember your training. Focus fire on concentrated areas. Use the biological dispersal devices as soon as they're in range. And whatever happens, hold the line long enough for the evacuation to complete. The human volunteers took their positions along hastily constructed barriers, weapons ready. Beside them stood Zelthari, who had chosen to fight despite their cultural opposition to violence. They looked terrified but determined, holding weapons that felt alien in their graceful hands. The Voidborn hit like a wave, flowing over the ground and through the air. The humans opened fire, plasma weapons and projectile guns tearing into the advancing mass. The Voidborn fell by the thousands, but for everyone destroyed, 10 more appeared. Deploy biological weapons, Elena ordered. Dispersal devices activated along the defensive line, releasing clouds of concentrated bacterial cultures. Where the aerosol touched the Voidborn, their forms began to break down, cells losing cohesion and falling apart. The advance slowed, the Voidborn pulling back from the contaminated areas. "It's working," Marcus shouted from his position at the command center. "The bacteria are more effective than we hoped. The Voidborn are avoiding the treated zones entirely." But the victory was temporary. The Voidborn began adapting, individual cells mutating to resist the bacterial compounds. Within hours they were advancing again, their forms shifting and changing to counter the new threat. "They're evolving too fast," Yuki reported, frustration clear in her voice. "We need to keep developing new variants, stay ahead of their adaptation." The battle raged for 3 days. Human volunteers fought alongside Zelthari defenders, holding defensive positions that should have fallen within hours. They suffered casualties, wounds from Voidborn attacks that dissolved armor and flesh alike. But the human healing factor that Yuki had documented proved crucial. Injuries that would have killed Zelthari in hours were survivable for humans, allowing them to return to the fight after treatment. Elena was everywhere during the battle, coordinating defenses, evacuating civilians, and making impossible decisions about where to allocate limited resources. She saw humans and Zelthari working together, saw a pacifist species learning to fight not out of aggression, but out of love for their world and their children. On the 4th day, the tide began to turn. Marcus and Yuki had developed a new variant of the biological weapon, one that incorporated multiple strains of bacteria that attacked different aspects of Voidborn cellular structure. The dispersal of this new weapon created zones where the Voidborn simply could not survive, forcing them to retreat from populated areas. "We're pushing them back," Robert reported from Tactical. "The Voidborn are withdrawing from the population centers. They're consolidating in the infected zones." "Maintain pressure," Elena ordered. Don't let them regroup. The final push came on the 5th day. Human and Zelthari forces advanced into the infected zones, deploying biological weapons in massive quantities. The Voidborn fought back desperately, but without the ability to quickly adapt, their numbers began to dwindle. By sunset, the immediate threat to Zelthar Prime had been contained. Elena stood on a hillside overlooking the capital city, watching as the last Voidborn swarms retreated into the darkness. Beside her, Seraphic surveyed the same scene, its expression unreadable. "We survived," the elder said quietly, "thanks to you and your people." "We helped," Elena corrected. "But your people fought too. They learned to defend themselves, to stand up against something that terrified them. That took more courage than anything we did." "Our culture will never be the same," Seraphic said. "We have learned to fight, to kill, to make weapons. We have compromised principles that stood for 12,000 cycles." Was it worth it? Elena thought about that question, about the cost of survival and the price of principles. You're still here to ask that question. Your children are still alive. Your culture can evolve, can incorporate these experiences and find new meaning. That's only possible because you survived. So yes, I think it was worth it. Over the following weeks, more humans arrived, along with supplies and technology. They helped the Zelthari rebuild their destroyed cities, clean up the infected zones, and establish permanent defenses against future Voidborn incursions. A new culture began to emerge, one that combined Zelthari philosophy with human pragmatism, creating something neither species could have achieved alone. Marcus and Yuki continued their research, developing better biological weapons and studying the Voidborn samples they had collected. What they discovered was troubling. The Voidborn were not native to this region of space. They had come from somewhere else, fleeing something even worse. "There are references in the Voidborn cellular memory," Marcus explained during a briefing. "Images, fragments of information about something they call the Devourers. The Voidborn aren't conquerors. They're refugees, consuming everything in their path because they're desperate to evolve fast enough to survive what's coming." Elena felt a chill run down her spine. Something worse than the Voidborn exists? Much worse, apparently. And according to these cellular memories, it's heading this way from the galactic core. She looked at the assembled humans and Zelthari, at the alliance they had forged through blood and sacrifice. They had won this battle, but it was only the beginning. "Then we prepare," Elena said firmly. The Zelthari needed guardians, and humanity answered that call. "If there's something worse coming, we'll face it together. That's what guardians do." Seraphic stepped forward, placing a hand over its heart in the Zelthari gesture of deep respect. "The Zelthari formally request that humanity establish a permanent presence on our world. Not as conquerors, but as partners. We have much to learn from each other." Elena smiled, feeling the weight of responsibility but also the warmth of hope. "We accept. And I think this is just the beginning. If there are other species out there facing threats they can't handle alone, humanity will stand with them too." As she looked at the stars above Zelthar Prime, Elena Torres knew that humanity had found its place in the galaxy, not as explorers or scientists, but as guardians, standing between the innocent and the darkness. It was a role born from Earth's harsh evolution, from a species that had learned to survive against impossible odds. The real work was just beginning. But for the first time since leaving Earth, Elena felt certain they were on the right path. Humanity would be the guardians this galaxy needed, no matter what threats emerged from the darkness between the stars.